This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome, everybody out there, to KLEAN Radio. In studio with me tonight, of course, is my co-host with the most, Andrew Spanswick. And Andrew has been in the industry of helping people for a long time. He's an addiction specialist and a mental health specialist. And
how are you doing, Judah?
I'm good. You know, we had a great weekend.
Right, you went up to Washington and Rockers for Recovery.
It was a pretty awesome event, and the hashtag tonight is IAmSober. So go to facebook.com/KLEAN Radio, hashtag IAmSober. It's also go to Twitter @KLEAN Radio. And yeah, we actually had an amazing event this weekend that KLEAN Treatment Center helped sponsor in Aberdeen, Washington.
Yes.
And
it's much like Aberdeen, Scotland.
Is it really in Aberdeen, Scotland?
That's where the name comes from.
Oh, well, I just learned something new.
Well, there you go.
The next time I go to Aberdeen, I'm actually going to tell them that. And,
you've been to their sister city?
And yes, exactly. But I was also at our facility in Washington State in Long Beach, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And it was really an amazing time. I got to, because of Milt Parham, who works with KLEAN, he set up this event with Rockers in Recovery. We were in Aberdeen, which is, oddly enough, also the home of Kurt Cobain.
Not exactly, but...
Well, that's what
Chris Novoselic, that's where they started hanging out, was in Aberdeen. Chris was from Aberdeen.
And the whole town is literally a dedication to him.
Right.
There's the Kurt Cobain bridge. There's statues of him all over town.
I'm sure he would have loved that.
And it's supposedly the bridge that he lived under. But the mayor of Aberdeen, Bill Simpson, Kurt went to Seattle and became famous, but he was from Aberdeen. Seattle embraced him as one of their own, but then he killed himself, and suddenly he became an Aberdeen guy again. We're happy to reclaim him. And
that's really creepy.
It's really creepy, and if you walk around Aberdeen, the drug problem there is horrific. You know? Yeah,
I mean, the whole of Oregon's suffering a really bad crisis with heroin in particular. So.
And we were there, unemployment's up to 10%, and they welcomed us with open arms, but there was a certain sadness because the event was held for people of Aberdeen, too, to come in and see the Rockers in Recovery, to see that there is hope. And, you know, this has happened to you, but I was at the Portland airport. My flight got delayed, and as I was sitting there, somebody walked up to me and said, are you Judah from KLEAN Radio? And I was like, yes. And he goes, you know, you guys did a show with Mackenzie Phillips, and it helped me greatly. And I was able to get sober because of that. I was able to come out and tell my wife that I had a heroin problem, and the process started.
As if she didn't know.
Right. And I didn't want to ask him that, but because people do always know.
They do always know.
Or they know something's wrong.
They know something's wrong, you're right.
You know, they don't always know what's wrong. And you've had that in your own life.
I did. I had a girlfriend that I thought had an eating disorder because she kept going to the bathroom. And then she goes, I got to tell you something. I go, what is it? She goes, I'm smoking crack. And I'm like, oh,
and
wrong
you're
problem.
Right. And you're in the industry.
I'm in the industry. Well, at least I identified she had a problem.
Right.
That's close.
True. But we know there's a problem. But he was able to come out and say that. And it was humbling. It's a humbling experience. And, you know, and I think it's a great idea that we do this more and more and more. Go to different states, do Rockers in Recovery, really, or our own Rockers in Recovery, and really bring these things to cities that don't have it, like Aberdeen.
Right.
And there's something so important, because we were talking about this, and it's the anonymity issue. And we realize a lot of people out there have this thing of breaking your own anonymity. You're allowed to break your anonymity. You don't have to say how you got sober. But it's all right to walk around and saying, I am sober. And that's why the hashtag is tonight, IAmSober.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people have misconceptions about what anonymity is, what the purpose of it's for, and it's more about respecting other people. I mean, the idea that you wouldn't promote a 12-step group that you're in to other people is ridiculous, and say that you're in it because that's part of your mission as someone that's in AA, which is to go out and help others. So by default, you have to break your anonymity. The other thing is, why can't people have the choice to break their anonymity? Right. You know, it's like, to me,
after a certain amount of time, we understand it from the beginning.
Well, I think that's a cautionary point more than anything else, because there still is a lot of stigma towards addiction and mental illness and other issues. So, you know, but that's, you know, for me, it's very important that people actually start realizing that the people that have mental illness, the people that have substance abuse problems, are just like everybody else. You know, they often can't identify them from other people. And, you know, the more that people see it's not just a problem of poverty and poor people and criminals, you know, the more acceptance we'll have. What I find most disturbing is, you know, the penal system in our country, which in 1970 we had 300,000 prisoners, and now we have 2.4 million.
Yeah.
You know, it's staggering. We've created a whole social class that we've basically decided just to lock up. And most of them are for nonviolent crimes, which are drug related.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to Clean Radio. Hashtag tonight is IAmSober. What does that look like to you? I want to know what IAmSober looks like to you. So give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. But again, it's like if we don't break our anonymity, guy in the airport might not walk up to us. People all the time are constantly walking up to you because of the show. And it's a forum. It's an open dialogue for people to have. You know, again, you don't always have to say how you are, how you got there. But just for people know that there are sober people walking around. For the people of Aberdeen to see Rockers in Recovery on stage. You know, the town that's glorifying Cobain. You know, to know that, hey, there are people in their 50s rocking out. There are people in their 40s sober rocking out.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Kurt Cobain was a very special person, and I think that there's a lot of different reasons that he's as famous and as recognized as he was. I don't particularly think it was his heroin use that really made him famous. And his death was more, I think, about mental health, depression, and his poor physical health. Certainly his addiction to heroin probably didn't help that at all. But he had a lot of issues and a lot of problems, and someone that really couldn't handle what he had chosen to do for a living. You know, it was a lot for somebody that, you know, you forget he wasn't that old, you know.
Yeah, he's 27.
Well, he was 20, you know, he was younger than that.
Yeah.
He was like 24, 23 when he broke. So, you know, into becoming a major artist. And he didn't really want to be in a big band at first. He wanted to just be in a small punk rock band. And he never had any idea he'd become like the #1 band in the world for a period. And that's a huge amount of pressure on someone, you know, especially when you think all of a sudden you got to write another album and the expectations are enormous. And it's just a hard thing. And also, how many times can you play Smells Like Teen Spirit before you want to shoot yourself in the head? You know?
Well, you know, that's exactly the point. I mean,
it's like every night you got to play the same damn song, you know?
And and plus, it's not exactly the most uplifting music. And then you're having to play, it every night.
You know, the funny thing is like a lot of those songs though are uplifting, even if they're negative. I mean, there's something about the energy of even negative songs that do actually give people a sense of calm and peace because they feel some sort of connection to other people's pain, and it makes them feel better, just like a self-help group.
And I think what's very important about talking about sobriety and talking about the openness of it is that if you do fall, you can come back. You know, and I think a lot of times, if this is the only disease, and it is a disease, right? If somebody gets cancer, you know, and they relapse, you don't say, "What do you do to get your cancer back?" How you're a bad guy or a bad woman.
I think we're actually starting to see a little bit of that, though. I mean, like Bloomberg in New York banning soda or trying to ban soda for obesity and in diabetes, and you know. We're seeing more and more an invasion of people's privacy and more blame, and I think a lot of that has to do with the increase in healthcare costs. There's also we've become more of a nanny state that thinks that, you know, everybody's problems and everybody's life should have a solution that's government based, and that's just not the way to go. You know, and it's just causing more and more problems.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to Clean Radio. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. The hashtag tonight is IAmSober. Go to facebook.com/Clean Radio. I think it's also important because last week we were talking about Lana Del Rey. She, you know, started talking about, you know, the romanticism of Cobain's death, and Cobain's daughter then said, "The death of a young musician isn't something to romanticize. I'll never know my father because he died young, and it became a desirable feature because people like you think it's cool." And I think there is something that's very sickly, you know, that we live in a society that
you know, Frances has gotten that from her own experiences.
Right.
I mean, her mother, of course, has horrible problems with addiction, and so does Frances herself, which she's publicly stated. So, you know, it's the struggle is obviously there's a genetic component, and there's also a social component to family systems. And addiction, as we know, is a family illness. Everybody's affected by the addict, or there's multiple addicts in a family. So whatever the underlying structure is psychologically that might be affecting the family and perpetuating addiction or making it impossible for all the members of the family to get help, those are the things that need to be talked about. And you're right, romanticizing addiction is not a good thing. I mean, you know, the idea that people should be dying at 27 and that makes their music better is ridiculous.
And it was amazing to me because we used to go to a 12-step meeting. I won't say which variety of one. but it was for alcohol. And in one of the places, it was in one of these bars in Hollywood, and across the walls was all the musicians that died at 27. And it was a very, you know, the way it was trying to be romantic with the way the pictures were. It was very creepy. And that was my experience this town. You know, Patrick and I were in the record store where we bought you these amazing albums.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really needed the Barry Manilow Greatest Hits on vinyl.
I thought you might like it.
I do actually like it because it's funny.
But they had a picture. They had a picture of Cobain, but it wasn't like it was an unhealthy looking picture of him. It was like him dope sick.
Right.
And in Patrick,
well, I mean, we see that also in fashion, right? The heroin waif look is still going on.
And you know what? Stop. And that's the thing about the Rockers in Recovery thing. Okay, I want to get back to this for a second.
They like blow up Kate Moss because they catch her doing coke on a subway. Yeah. It's like, there's a reason, you know?
Right. But we live in a country that doesn't romanticize people getting older. You know, and you know, you're not going to sound how you did. When I went to Billy Joel, everybody said to me, how did he sound?
Oh, my God, the guy looks just like Andrew. That's what they said.
That's exactly right. But they also said, how did he sound? And I'm like, he sounded good, but he's 65. Right. Even if he didn't sound great.
I just have to say, I was just in New York this past week, right, raising money for our company, and I was in a restaurant, which I don't want to advertise because the food wasn't all that great. But anyway, out of the kitchen, this guy came all the way out from the back of the kitchen, goes, Billy Joel. It's like, and I'm like, oh God, no, I hope he's not coming to me. And he comes up to me and he goes, you're not Billy Joel. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. I'm like, so obviously from kitchen to table, I am Billy Joel.
You know, I see it a little bit. And,
I don't see it at all. And he's like 10 years older than me.
It's the goatee.
Okay, so great.
It's
he did have some pretty hot women, so I can't be, you know. But I can't play piano. That's the problem.
Or sing. And
thanks.
If you just tuned in, you are listening to Clean Radio. Let's get a Kyle in Mount Hood, Oregon. Welcome to Clean Radio, Kyle.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad. I just I wanted to call in, you know, because I've been listening to you guys for about 6-8 months now or so, and you know, I have my whole long addiction story. I'm not going to bore you guys with it, but you know, about 6 months ago, everything kind of hit the fan, for lack of a better term.
And then one that we could actually say on the radio.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I struggled all my life with addiction. You know, I went to rehab the first time when I was 20. It was just painkillers. Got married, was great for 6-7 years, and then I kind of relapsed because my ex-wife and I got a divorce, and I relapsed, and it just, you know, I went back. I started right off where I was the last time I took a pill, started taking pills, and then I started shooting heroin less than a month later, and then I got arrested, you know, and charged possession, all that kind of crap, went to jail, and you know, it just, it was only like a 2-month little deal that happened, and so then I got back on track. But the thing that got me back on track was listening to you guys and you guys helping me remember that it's okay to live life, you know, without being high, you know, and okay to face those demons that I've been struggling with without, you know, trying to lock them away by, you know, slamming a needle in my arm. So I just want to thank you guys.
Kyle, I actually want to ask you a question because I think a lot of people, Andrew, and you could definitely answer this, is so he was going through trouble in his 20s, right? Right? Then you got married. Mm-hmm. Did you think that would help solve your addiction?
No, you know, see, the thing is I struggled all throughout high school. I had a whole bunch of surgeries, and I got addicted to painkillers and everything. And it was still, I was sober. I was clean. Well, I'm not. I'm going to say clean and sober. I was drinking every once in a while when I got married. I hadn't done any drugs for quite a while, but it was always an underlying thing. And then it just, like, the very first time I ever had something that got hurt again, it started back up, and so it was always an underlying problem, and I always thought, I guess I thought that getting married and starting a new life and everything would kind of help push that away, but it certainly didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think often people look for different ways to change their lives outside of themselves, and marriage can often be one of them. I know it was for me and my multitude of marriages.
You're right.
But you know what? I want to tell you something. I give you props for talking about this stuff, Andrew, and joking about it, because people hear this, and you have a great life. Yeah. And people hear this, and sometimes we laugh at this stuff, but that's how we get better.
Well, also, it's just, I think that, you're often looking for solutions, and I think everybody's continuing to try to grow. I actually saw Sarah Silverman the other night, and, I normally don't like to quote comedians too much, but she had a great line going on about how, this whole thing about I want someone to complete me and all this thing. And she's like, no, not really. I really want you to come complete to what I'm complete of, and then let's just be awesome together. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's so true. And I think that that's a lesson you learn as you get older. Our society raises us with all these expectations of what marriage is or what relationships should do for you. And our society isn't the way it used to be with regard to marriage. Marriage now is a very different institution than it was,
of course,
not very long ago, and not very long ago before that. It's been, an ongoing developing institution. And now we have, gay marriage. So obviously it's something different than it's been in the past. It's not just about control of reproduction. So,
right.
So I think, it shows an opportunity about how we explore ourselves, what we choose to do, and then what we do with that. Because often we just transfer onto people what we want them to think of us, and we lie to ourselves and create all sorts of, issues that instead of actually getting real, honest feedback and making good changes.
Kyle, whereabouts are you, by the way? In relation to Long Beach or Aberdeen?
Okay, so go about 200 miles south, and have you ever heard of Mount Hood? Like the big mountain right outside of Portland?
Sure.
Okay, well, I live
not
right...
have heard about Mount Hood. God,
well,
he was just up there. He was just up there. That's what's bad about it.
Yeah. So I live in Brightwood, which is probably about 30 miles south of Timberline Lodge.
Okay, cool. And how are meetings over there?
They're all right. They're few and far between right here, but it's it's pretty close proximity to Portland area. So, they have all the AA, NA, MA, CA, all that kind of stuff in the Portland area, and so it's not bad. We have some meetings out in Sandy and stuff, and there's a couple meetings actually up the mountain where I live too, but they're only once a week type of deal. But usually I catch a meeting after work or something during the week, a few times a week, out in the Portland area, because I work in Portland. So.
See, Kyle, it's cool. We're going to be opening up 2 IOPs in Portland, intensive outpatient programs. But we're also going to have alumni groups and open meetings there at both those locations. So as those come online, we'll let you know the addresses and what's going on.
And just come and hang out with us, Kyle. And here's the thing. I want to tell people out there that are listening. Kyle lives in a pretty small town. And how long are you sober now?
Well, sober again now about 6.5 months.
That's amazing. And the reason I want to say this is because we often hear them say, you're doing everything you can to stay sober. You're going to meetings. You're driving far distances to stay sober. And you're not coming up with excuses. And that's what Andrew, but people that really want to do this do. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're willing to drive. So what we're going to do is I want you to go to Facebook.com/KLEAN Radio. I want you to like us, but I also want you to private message us. And I want to send you some shirts to hand out over there. I want to spread, like you've been listening to us. I want to get this message across, and maybe one day we'll come out there.
Right on. Well, so what on Facebook?
Go to Facebook.com/KLEAN Radio. Like us, private message me your address, and we're going to send you some shirts.
Right on, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for all you guys do.
Thank you, Kyle. And we'll call back anytime.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you. And that was Kyle calling from Mount Hood, Oregon. If you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. The 800-222-5222. Hashtag tonight is IAmSober. What does that look like?
I'm a little disturbed. My fiance just texted me. She thought I was Billy Joel.
That's actually really funny. Sorry, Lydia. Sorry to break the news to you.
Wow.
But also, so we're talking about rockers in recovery, and just so people out there know, there's hope. There are 5 there's tons of musicians who are sober, but here's some of the 5. There's Slash, there's Eric Clapton, Brian Welsh from Korn, Ozzy Osbourne, Eminem, and it's funny how I had to say Brian Welsh from Korn because he's not as. I was like, who's Brian Welsh? I thought he was the pitcher one time.
He's actually a big born-again Christian.
That's how he got sober. But listen, however you get sober, that's how you. That's what matters.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying that was his path.
He actually got. It's like you say. He got baptized in the Jordan River. So seemed to work for Brian Welsh from Korn.
Man, different ways.
I actually went swimming in the Jordan River, and it didn't help me much.
You found the fermented section.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And a big one that everyone knows, really, I think, and it's a big spokesman for being sober, is Eric Clapton, who's even started his own rehab.
Which is an amazing place, which is Crossroads in Antigua. And he
gives back a lot.
And he gives back, and he sells tons of guitars. So many of the things he does now are for the rehab. So people
talking about anonymity, it's funny because he came to New Orleans when I was living there, and there was an AA meeting, and he showed up to the first one. There was like 5 other people in the meeting. The next day, it was like overwhelmingly packed. You couldn't even get in. It was like,
we know that's how. But listen, whatever gets somebody to a meeting, and I think that's it's like whatever gets you to the meeting. So if you just tuned in, you are listening to Clean Radio. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. We're talking a little bit tonight about breaking anonymity and why it's important. And what you just said, Eric Clapton breaking his anonymity helps people, Andrew. It actually, people could go, oh, look, there's that guy. There's that famous musician that could still play music.
Right, but it's also important to recognize that someone that isn't famous might have more at stake. Eric Clapton has a ton of money, so he has a lot of privilege that the ordinary person might not have, and they might be concerned about their jobs and about how their neighbors think of them and things like that. So I think it's important for people to respect other people's anonymity no matter what. And like the thing with Eric Clapton I just explained, that's kind of unfortunate. Right. I mean, I know it's Eric Clapton and, people gossip and whatnot. But, for some people, these meetings are very, very serious and their anonymity is still important to them so that they can feel safe enough to get help and get treatment. And I think, even some of the leaks that come out of rehabs when people go into rehab are just horrible,
Right. It's okay to break your own.
Yeah.
Just don't be. It's like that happened on CNBC last week. Somebody got outed.
Yeah.
They outed one of the heads of the company. I think it's of Apple, actually. And it's break your own.
Yeah, right.
Don't bring other people out with you.
Yeah, I hate to compare it to gay rights, but to some degree, there's a lot, the stigma now that we're seeing with the mentally ill and the addicted is kind of similar. A lot of people don't choose to be addicts; they become addicts, or they were addicts from the time of their birth because they had the genetic structure that it took off early in their life. And these are people that we should be helping, not locking up for nonviolent crimes.
So actually, CNN had an interesting story about and if you think you're if you think you're not a heavy drinker. There's a new CDC report that will answer that. And we're going to get to that question after the break. So if you just tuned in, you're listening to Clean Radio. It's actually a really interesting story. I want to get to that right at the break. So give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. We have our buddy coming in with our social network telling us what people are saying about IAmSober. The hashtag tonight is IAmSober. And I want to hear from you, Andrew. What do you think sober is? What do you think sober looks like? Because it is different for everybody. So when we come back from the break, I want to discuss what sober is to you. What do you look like? What does Am I Sober look like?
I'm glad you're playing my Barry Manilow gift that I got from Judah. I don't know how you got that onto the computer so fast.
Stand by. We'll be back in a couple.
I like Mandy better.
Are you or someone you care about addicted to drugs or alcohol? Addiction ruins lives and destroys families. Bring an end to the pain and suffering by calling KLEAN Treatment Centers. KLEAN has helped people from around the world break free by not only treating the addiction, but the underlying causes and providing vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean with no gimmicks and no false promises. If you need immediate assistance or just have questions, call KLEAN Treatment Centers for guidance. A much better life awaits.
This is the reason I love this, and it's so important. When I was 18 years old, I had this amazing drug counselor in rehab who took us to a concert, and he took us to see Radiohead open for REM. So I'm dating myself. So it's about 20 years ago, and he looks at me and he goes, "Friedman, you're not going to stay sober." He goes, "But you're never going to be able to say that it wasn't fun." And that was part of my speech in Aberdeen, Washington, as I introduced Rockers in Recovery. It was pretty wild, and that's something we're talking about tonight. But one of the things, Andrew, is these are rockers that are breaking anonymity a little bit and trying to help people. we posted a social media. What is the hashtag tonight is IAmSober. Buddy, how is Buddy Totten? How is our social media doing?
Pretty good. So we posted breaking your personal anonymity, share your thoughts and experiences with us. And then Heather posted, she has about 23 years clean. She discovered a coworker of hers was having a problem. And so she outed herself to the coworker. And then what happened is everybody else at work found out, but she was okay with it, and she considered it to be worth it, even though she had that little hiccup, because now she started taking her coworker to meetings, and her coworker is celebrating 3 months clean.
That's amazing.
So that's pretty awesome right there.
Huh?
You know?
Yeah. And yeah, Andrew, I mean, and you're right. It's not about breaking somebody else's, but it's about breaking yours, and with that, you could help a lot of people.
Yeah, it's time for people to start stepping up, you know, and showing that the face of addiction and mental illness isn't as horrible and bad as people said. About 3 days ago, there was a great article, and I can't believe it, for the USA Today, because normally there's just nothing on there. But
did they write it, or was it cut and pasted?
I don't know, but it was on the cover, and it was talking about mental illness and the stigma of mental illness, and their thesis was that it was government created, but. You know, some of that's true, some of that's not. I think, you know, government is a representation of the people, so it still sort of came out of, you know, the mythology of myths or the misconceptions about the mentally ill through religion and, you know, the devils and evil spirits and stuff like that. But the fact that we still stigmatize the mentally ill and that we think that they're so incredibly dangerous and that we think we should lock them up in prisons instead of taking care of them in institutions is just a horrible thing. So.
You know, you just brought back a thought the other night at the concert. There was a woman that came up to me, and she was about 60 years old, and she's from Aberdeen, and she has liver cancer, but she's sober a month and a half. And, you know, I'm sure there was other underlying issues and the stigma, but it was pretty amazing that she was so open and honest. And she goes, oh, I just share this with everybody. And I'm like, and I was like, well, it's great. And, but I was glad for her that we were there, because I don't know who you know, it was great that she had a forum to share this. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I think the stigma with mental illness is atrocious.
But also, I think, you know, government and society uses things like this to criminalize people that we determine to be undesirable, yeah. And we lock them up. You don't go from 300,000 people in prison to 40 years later, 2.3 million, unless you've criminalized a lot of different behaviors.
Absolutely.
And the behaviors we tend to criminalize are ones that we can use on segments of society that, you know, the ones in power think are not desirable, which unfortunately tends to be minorities and poor people. So, you know, a lot of this is political, and a lot of this is serious social issues. Everybody has problems. You know, there's and rich people or as addicts, or, you know, just because they can afford the alcohol and drink good whiskey, and, you know, aren't drinking on a street corner because they have nowhere to hang out, doesn't mean that they don't have a problem. You know. And I think we as a society have really got to take a good look at how we're dealing with these issues and start looking at ways to expand how we spend money and care. I mean, if they really knew the facts, I think would be horrified. If you're mentally ill and you end up on Social Security disability for your mental illness, say you're schizophrenic, you only have a $250,000 lifetime cap of benefits under Medicare, right? That's really only about 10 months of treatment for your whole life, right? But if you go into prison for your life, it costs the state about $1.4 million. So we'll pay more to keep someone locked up in prison than we will to help them with mental illness.
No, I mean, it's shocking.
Where's the sense in that? There's nothing. There's no way to justify that in a civilized culture.
I mean, you know, I'm very surprised that our government wastes money on things, you know, and doesn't spend correctly. But you're right, and I think, you know, you've been doing this for I make it. You always outdate. You're very young, but you got into this very early, and you've seen this firsthand. This isn't you just reading the articles.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, I worked in the worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst.
Some pretty scary places for what I think most people think is normal.
Yeah.
But, you know, what's funny is when you work in those kind of places for a while, you actually do realize what I've been talking about, that, you know, these people actually have a lot of humanity to them, and there's a big part of them that isn't sick. And with the proper medications, they're fine. They're good citizens, and they're certainly not criminal.
Yeah. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Thank you, buddy, with the social media update. Tonight, hashtag is IAmSober. So give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Let's go to Anita, who's been waiting on hold for a while in Hawthorne. Welcome back to KLEAN Radio, Anita.
Hello.
Hi, how are you, Anita?
I'm doing fine. I'm still sober. I intend to stay that way. But there have been some new developments or issues that I'm dealing with. And first of all, I was diagnosed with anemia. Well, that was okay. And then I took an X-ray of my chest, and they didn't like it. So they had me have a CAT scan, CT CAT scan, and they didn't. Then they wanted me to have a PET scan. Well, I've had a PET scan. Now tomorrow, I'm being admitted into the hospital because they want to do an autopsy.
Well, I don't think it's an autopsy.
Not an autopsy.
I think you mean a biopsy.
No, an autopsy, a biopsy.
You'd have to die for an autopsy. We don't want that to happen. So.
Well, I am dying. But
We all are.
We all. Everybody has an expiration date, and they don't know when it is. So.
yeah, but it's biopsy.
Correct.
Yeah, and it's futile.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I can understand your frustration and your fears regarding illness, but it's important to have hope. And my dad died recently. He died in this previous year, and they gave him 2 months to live 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And the last day that he was conscious, he was still actually working.
Oh my God.
So
Andrew's not joking about that
I'm not
either.
kidding
He wasn't
either.
just working. He was working overtime.
he was actually writing recommendations for graduate students.
I've gone downhill because all I want to do is sleep and eat and sleep and eat.
Actually, I feel that way. So not to make light of what you're doing. Maybe I better go to the doctor. I don't know.
Anita here.
The regular weight is 120.
Yeah.
And I'm 104.
Well, Anita, you know what? Try to think
I'm
about.
skin and bone.
We only write the future chapters, even if it's the ending chapter of your life, hasn't been written yet. And I would encourage you to think about what you want that chapter to be, and put whatever energy and effort you have into writing that, and have it be as positive as possible.
And Anita, you don't have the answers yet of what the scans are.
All
Okay,
right,
so you're really
so hang in there. Your mental
I have the
status.
scan answers. I've got cancer, lung cancer.
There's lots of treatment for lung cancer. People who smoke, they did a good job of giving them treatments. But we gotta say goodbye. But Anita, please call back and let us know how the biopsy goes.
Yeah, please call back anytime. It's a lot of people when they get sober, Andrew, they weren't taking care of themselves for a long time.
Or they were covering up illnesses and ignoring it, like they ignore the mail. You know?
It is. It's the old
same
adage.
thing, yeah.
It's I used to think, and alcoholics and drug addicts a lot of times think if the mail wasn't answered, it never came.
Yeah, if you just stick it in a drawer, it doesn't exist, and they think the same thing with their health. If I ignore it, it doesn't really matter. I can worry about that later.
And and people are always like, well, I didn't get sober for this. I didn't, and I'm not referring to Anita. I'm referring to it was my first summer of sobriety. I had 18 cavities.
Wow.
And I it was literally spent in the dentist the whole summer. And I remember thinking to myself, I didn't get
most addicts that I know that have 18 cavities were looking for painkillers.
Yeah, because me. And but what was so important to me was that I was actually taking care of myself. I turned it around. And I turned it around, instead of being angry about having all these cavities, I turned it around to being proud that I was finally dealing with it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that. I mean, from dealing with taxes to money problems to confronting family members about things that, you didn't want to talk about, to dealing with shame that you might have from behavior or whatever's happened in the past. So, it's a process, and it's not an easy process to confront everything that you've been avoiding. Or have not been able to address because you've been using.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yeah. And, it's so important that people move forward.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio, so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Anita, we pray for you, and please let us know what's going on.
Now let's talk to Tom.
Yeah, let's get to Tom in Portland. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Tom.
Hi. Yeah, I have a couple of issues with the facts that you gave out about mental illness and its costs.
Sure.
And the political will, the problem that we're having with law enforcement versus, I mean, we have a big problem with law enforcement here in my city as far as the police beating up people who are mentally ill. I think that needs to change. But
I'm glad you agree with that. All right, Tom.
A whole lot of money keeping people, at least in my city, we spend close to $15,000 per bed per patient a month, and they don't get thrown out after some magical figure. They're here. Some of them are here for life.
Well, there are different programs in certain different municipalities, and there are some different groups. But generally, what I was talking about was not Medicaid, which is state-funded municipality block grant matching. I was talking about Medicare disability for schizophrenia. So, you know, there are some exceptions, and there's some people that have great insurance plans where they can stay in rehab for 2 years or a mental hospital. But the vast majority of people with mental illness are not getting the help they used to. We went from a bed occupancy of 90% greater in 1950 than we have now, and the population has grown dramatically since 1950. And we've seen an equal number, if not more, increase in the number of beds in prisons. And we know that there's a huge population in the prison authorities now are realizing, and the policymakers are realizing, that they've become the caretakers of the mentally ill, and they're ill-equipped to deal with it. So I think there's beginning to be an awareness and definitely a need, and people are seeing a need to stop treating the mentally ill as criminals.
Now, I totally agree with that, but the problem that I see, and it's not just something that I see, I hear college lectures on this. I've heard a couple of things on our public radio broadcasts, and I've also seen it firsthand with a couple of people last year who were hauled in some kind of legal gray area and forced into a mental hospital and forced to take medications. That's a dangerous precedent to set. That the mental health, I don't want to call it an industry. I'm sure it will be soon enough, but
well, there's definitely a mental health industry, you know, and I'll actually agree with you that that's one of the things that bothers me the most about how we're dealing with it. Because what happens is, instead of people being admitted to a psychiatric hospital for proper evaluation, which really takes 30 days at least, and then probably staying in treatment for 90 days or longer, what happens is they get put in an emergency room. They look at them where they don't have a chance to baseline them and find out what's really going on with them. Sometimes they're having a brief psychotic episode from using a drug, and they fill them full of Haldol and antipsychotics and tranquilizers like Ativan and a shot so that they can discharge them, because there aren't resources to pay to keep them in the ER or admit them to the hospital. So once again...
Well, I'm worried about the opposite, though. I'm worried that mental health is taking over the obligation of law enforcement, and people are losing. Well,
you really don't have to worry about that, because that's not happening.
Well, it is happening.
It really is not. I mean, there's been a huge effort by the ACLU to make, and this has been the classic problem. Look, I would say right away that I know that mental health hospitals prior to deinstitutionalizations were not necessarily all the best places in the world. And that was largely because we didn't have very many medications. And it wasn't until the advent of 15 key antipsychotics that we then were able to deinstitutionalize state hospipals. But also what happened was there's been a lot of key legal judgments saying that if people take antipsychotic medication and all of a sudden they're not schizophrenic and they're not acting, they don't have the symptoms of schizophrenia and they're not delusional, that they should have the right to choose to leave or not, even though they might continually cycle in and out of hospitals because they don't take their medication. And we know with mental illness, one of the biggest problems is medication compliance. So, you know, I think for a layperson, or maybe you aren't a layperson, maybe, I don't know, you're a therapist, I don't know what your experience is, but for me, having seen this cycle over and over and over again, I think there is a need for us to take a very close look at how we manage chronic, long-term, really acute, and by that I mean the worst type, bad, mental illnesses, and we provide humane care for them.
You know, and he's also calling from a place where there's tons of teen homelessness. There's tons of drug addicts living on the street. Andrew, there's obviously, we're very big into dual diagnosis. What came first, the chicken or the egg? It doesn't really matter. Yep. But if you're 16 years old and you're shooting up on the street and willing to be homeless, that's not just a heroin problem.
Of course not.
Yeah, but I don't think people understand that enough.
Yeah, I mean, you point to any drug addict, and I can generally tell you the possibility of what their underlying psychiatric disorders are.
It's the greatest party
Even if it's,
favor game.
and people don't realize that anxiety and depression, which affect 50% of the population plus, at least once in their lifetime, a case of major depression or a severe problem with anxiety is a mental illness. That isn't normal. It isn't normal for your brain to not be functioning. It's normal to be depressed about a situational event, but to then have it become a major depression is not normal. And we now have great treatment for these things, and there needs to be more education about what's normal depressions, what's normal grief, what's normal anxiety, and what's pathological depression, what's pathological anxiety.
I love that. I love that you're talking about that, because you're right. If things aren't going great, and if you're not sleeping for 2 days straight, that's not normal. And it's okay. There's hope, but it's still, let's deal with the issue.
Yeah, I might give it a little longer than that, but certainly, speaking to your doctor and finding out what's appropriate or what's not for you is important. Yeah. So, and if you have the resources and you're willing to do it, go out there and reach for it. But the problem is most people in our country, unfortunately, don't have the resources or access, or don't know how to get it, even if it is available.
And if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. We asked before the break, are you a heavy drinker? You'd actually be really surprised by the CDC report. Women are considered heavy drinkers if they have 8 or more drinks a week, according to the Center for Disease Control. Men can have 14. At 15, you are a heavy drinker in the eyes of the CDC. 1 in 10 deaths among adults between the ages of 20 and 64 are due to excessive alcohol consumption. I want to get back to this men.
Well, one of the things that really bothers me, it doesn't account for binge drinking. Yeah. So what, if you have 13 drinks only on Saturday, that's not a problem.
Right. It's like if you take them in one day.
Right. 2 drinks a week is fine, but 13 and on Saturdays, fine too.
Because again, they look at binge drinking because they've decided to say that binge drinking is just a college fun thing.
And remember though, what also bothers me about this article and the CDC and their report is that it's saying heavy drinking. And so people think, oh, you know what? I drink 15 drinks a week and I don't have a problem. And you know what? They probably don't. They're heavy drinkers. They might have long-term health consequences from it, but they don't have alcoholism necessarily. Some do. But mostly they don't have alcoholism. They're just heavy drinkers. They're abusing alcohol to a level where it's not healthy for them, according to the Centers for Disease Control. So they're open to cancer and liver failure and other problems.
That's actually a great point.
Yeah,
it's actually you know what.
And it encouraged people. They're like, oh well, the study is complete crap. I drink 15 drinks and I'm fine, so I'm not going to pay attention to any warning from the government or from any medical provider because they don't know what they're talking about. I've been drinking 15 drinks a week and I've never had a problem.
I'm begging you to write an article about that, and I'm going to bother because I think that is a brilliant point that I've actually never heard, and I know this is going to get to your head, but that nobody I've ever heard say. When these studies come out, they're so dangerous because people are looking at them so myopically.
Well, people don't I think, don't really understand science very well. They don't understand really how to read, studies and reports.
Because this is the CDC. This is the most influential organization, one of the most influential organizations in America, saying this is the only thing. This is the only issue.
They don't really define what heavy drinking means and what the consequences are. They just put this number out there, and they don't tell you that, being a heavy drinker is a choice, and it's not a disease to be a heavy drinker. It's just an unhealthy choice in terms of what you're consuming, and we recognize that it probably leads to cancer and other diseases.
And you're giving creed to people to go, look, this is what I drink.
Right.
This is what if the guy's 110 pounds? 2 drinks a night gets him drunk. Is he not an alcoholic because he didn't match your 14 drinks a week? And
And the other irony is they say you should have, a glass or 2 of wine a day. Yeah.
It's like the butter thing.
Then you're a heavy drinker.
It's like the butter thing.
It's like the butter thing, right? It's like,
I think it was News Time.
Carrots are now toxic too. I don't know.
Time had that picture of butter on the cover.
But it's the whole thing with marijuana too. It's like you smoke it once and you're going to go crazy, or smoke crack once you're going to be addicted forever. And I'm not recommending that anybody do any of those things. But that just isn't the way it works for most people. So
it's not that easy. It doesn't just fit into this little box. But let's get a Martin calling from Vancouver, Washington. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Martin.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I just want to let you guys know, I was addicted to drugs and alcohol for about 2 decades.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
About 9 years ago, I got prescribed by my doctor some Oxycontin.
Right.
Ended up getting cut off of my Oxycontin after about 5 years of use.
Wow.
Due to a dirty UA. But they cut me off cold turkey. And
that's not good.
Yeah, I didn't know about how bad the withdrawals were and whatnot, so I ended up having to go to the streets for my medicine, and that was too expensive, so I ended up having to switch to heroin, which was horrible. And so I tried to quit for many years. For like the last 3 years, I tried to quit on my own, switch drugs, Suboxone, cold turkey, whiskey. I tried many different ways, but until I decided I couldn't do this, I was helpless, and I had to give it to God and ask God for the help I needed. Since last January, I went into detox. My wife and I went into detox and treatment and whatnot, and I've been clean and sober ever since. I went to treatment only for 6 days. I left after 6 days because I kept getting in trouble for refusal to take meds. They were trying to force me to take some pain meds, and I told them, hey, pain meds got me strung out on heroin. I'm not taking these pain meds. So they would write me up for refusal to take meds.
Well, I'd hate to even ask where you went because that sounds like horrible treatment. And also your GP or whoever was prescribing you the oxycodone sounds awful as well. You know, people that have problems with, you know, chronic pain and are put on opiates, especially for a period of 5 years, which seems extremely long as well, should be titrated, which means slowly weaned off the drugs, not just gone cold turkey, because obviously the withdrawal effects were enough for you to do things that you normally wouldn't have done, which is criminal behavior and things that were clearly unhealthy for yourself. I'm glad that you found a way, be it through religion or whatever, to, you know, be humble about what was going on and figure out a way to take pride in yourself and become sober. So it's a great story.
And Martin.
And by the way, it's a very common story. We're seeing a lot of that. A lot of our clients have the exact same story where, you know, they start off with some sort of medication. They end up buying stuff on the street. It's too expensive, and they switch to heroin, which has become extremely plentiful, largely because of the war in Afghanistan. Opium production has gone up 95% in Afghanistan and is flooding Europe and the U.S. So if people think that our government stopped the production of opium in Afghanistan, that's not true. We were out there actually defending the fields to make sure that we could supply income for the people that live there. It's just craziness.
Yeah, we got legal dope dealers now, which are doctors. And
bad.
I was getting prescribed 40 milligrams, 120, 40 milligrams, and 95 milligram oxycodones every month.
Yeah. You know, I hate to say it, but there's some doctors, and luckily it's not all doctors. There's a lot of very good doctors out there, but there's some doctors that see their prescription pad as a way to write money for themselves. And, you know, they won't let you leave the office unless you pay. You don't get your prescription until you pay. And, you know, it's just criminal. And I think the government's doing a good job actually now of shutting down a lot of these pill mills, as they're called. The other thing that's happening is the DEA... Let me just say quickly, the other thing that's happening is the DEA is actually creating databases. So you can enter a patient's name into a database, and you can immediately see every prescription they've gotten from every doctor under their DEA number. So people shopping doctors and getting multiple prescriptions for the same thing is coming to an end.
See, I had to tell my doctor now that, hey, I'm an addict. Don't ever prescribe me benzos. Well, they were prescribing Xanax also, and or narcotics. You can never prescribe me those ever again. Even if I break my arm, don't prescribe me that crap ever. And I tried to, when I was getting the 40 milligram oxys, I tried to lower them because they were too strong. And my doctor said, no, I know what you need to be on. I tried to get dropped down to maybe 30 milligram oxycodones. They wouldn't do it. The doctor, she prescribed me promethazine, a nausea medication, so I could continue to take the 40 milligram Oxycontin and not have to feel sick. And I told her, that doesn't make sense. You're going to mask my sickness by giving me another pill? No, why don't you just lower me? She goes, no.
There's definitely, I mean, at Clean Treatment Centers, we have very clear detox regimens. We're very good at dealing with that. We've been doing it now for, you know, years, and we know how to make those detoxes easier. One of the problems is that there's been an opinion within the medical community and within the treatment facility community that somehow detoxes should be made difficult and hard. And that, you know, and I even saw it on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, which upset me greatly, where patients were throwing up and having seizures and stuff like that. And the reality is, if you're properly medicated on a detox with proper care, those things should not be happening. And if you're in a rehab and something like that starts happening, or you go to someone and you're working with a doctor and that's happening to you, go away from there and get to a place where you can get proper treatment, where you can have a comfortable detox, and the chances of you having a positive outcome are going to be much greater.
Because it's that old school mentality to punish. They have to feel their crimes of using.
We're seeing a huge transition within the field of both mental health and addiction, where finally we're saying, hey, you know what? There are medications and ways of treating people that are more humane than this sort of social model only. And the combination of therapy and proper medication and proper patient management is what leads to better outcomes. And that's what we're doing, and we're seeing that with our clinics.
And Martin, thanks for calling in. Keep checking in with us. Let us know how you're doing. It's great. However you get sober tonight, whether it's through God, through the 12 steps. I just want to remind people that, I believe in God, but I also believe God gave us the 12 steps and gave us mental health facilities and gave us all these different things.
We also have to say that God gave us some terrible doctors. So
that's exactly right.
So I think it's important that you realize that it's actually about your ability to take control of your life. Don't always look for external validation or external control to get better. There's ways for you to take that control yourself. I'm a big, strong believer in that people taking personal responsibility and researching themselves if they're capable and finding a positive way to get treatment is an admirable way to go. And if you really want to have good long-term success, I think you have to be able to take that on.
I agree. And the biggest question I have for you, though, Andrew, and it's bigger than anything. Will you be bowling with us this Wednesday night? Oh, my gosh. After my high score of 31, I don't know if I can stand that embarrassment again. You can't go down. I can't go down. I mean, you could only... 31 was actually, pretty impressive. We'll put up the bumpers. How many gutter balls was that? That was it was... But how much fun did you have? I actually had an amazingly fun time, but except for the fact that I got 31. But it didn't matter because we're not about that. We're just, I know we call ourselves... it was a little humiliating, 31, and now I've told the whole world that I got a 31 and you know what? Next time I'm going to change your score. Wednesday night. Change my score. Wednesday nights, sober I don't want a fake score. I want to know really how badly I'm doing. We actually had about 34 Reality testing's important. We had 34 people at Pins in Studio City Wednesday night, sober, bowling, having fun. We're going to be doing it again. And it was great to see a lot of people I hadn't seen in a few, months or whatever. And, I just love that we've got a great community of alumni that come together and have fun. And not just alumni, people in the sober community coming with our alumni, having fun, integrating, because it's so important. One of the biggest things about sobriety, Andrew, and you did this, we're going to do this again Wednesday night, is learning to have fun. We had fun in Aberdeen. Learning how to live your life again. We had fun with Rockers in Recovery. Yeah. We posted a bunch of photos. Go to KLEANradio.com/Facebook or KLEANradio.com. Really, Billy Joel? Yeah. Really? I can't believe it. I'm going to kill the guys on the board tonight. And you know what? It's great to have Steve back. I want to thank everybody out there. The board, great operator, Steve. KLEANradio.com.
Are you or someone you care about addicted to drugs or alcohol? Addiction ruins lives and destroys families. Bring an end to the pain and suffering by calling KLEAN Treatment Centers. KLEAN has helped people from around the world break free by not only treating the addiction, but the underlying causes and providing vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean with no gimmicks and no false promises. If you need immediate assistance or just have questions, call KLEAN Treatment Centers for guidance. A much better life awaits.